Times have changed around the world. The Chicago Cubs have won their first World Series in over 100 years. Donald Trump became president of the United States of America. And somehow, Keith Richards is still alive. But most importantly, it's been about 5 years since I last released an episode of the Ewok Gamer. Since then, I've changed my name to Grootkid, which has had arguably no effect on me whatsoever, and I also lost a dear friend to me. You see, the Lunar Gamer, he passed away choking on a cashew one day. But I remember, one of the last things he wanted me to do, right before he passed, was that he wanted me to review Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards.
Anyways, when you beat Dark Matter, he will expel himself, and you won't see him again until Kirby 64. But I'll let the Ewok Gamer handle that review.
And I plan on making good by that, by doing the review and paying tribute to my friend. My love for the Kirby franchise starts a while back whenever video game rentals were still commonplace at places like Blockbuster and Family Video. Well, in my case, I had a place called Schnucks, which is a Midwestern supermarket chain, and they had a rental section. Lo and behold, one of the games that I would check out regularly was Kirby 64. Sadly, I just never took the initiative to buy the game. It wasn't until recently, whenever I went to a convention called Mo GameCon that was hosted in St. Charles, that I finally picked up the game. Even though I pride myself on being a collector, I did not get it complete in box. Instead, I picked up the cartridge from one stand, and then a couple stands down, I managed to get the manual as well. To play Kirby 64, there's no special requirements and none of the expansion deck that'd be needed in other games like Donkey Kong or Majora's Mask. Instead, you just take your favorite controller, plug it in, realize that the game probably doesn't work because it's really dusty and old, and then be happy whenever it finally works. After the game boots up, you see the familiar logos from Nintendo and HAL Laboratories, and then you get a nice little cutscene that follows after, which I'm going to give a little bit of context directly from the manual. The Crystal Shards. In a distant corner of the galaxy, fairies lived peacefully on the planet called Ripple Star, but then, one day, a mysterious black cloud appeared and surrounded the peaceful planet. The cloud, a sinister force known as Dark Matter, had come in search of the fairies' secret treasure, their shining crystal. And unfortunately, due to the world of mandatory plot devices, our little friend here named Ribbon, who's trying to protect the crystal, loses her battle with the Dark Matter and it ends up breaking into little pieces that scatter throughout the solar system. However, Ribbon herself ends up falling onto the planet called Popstar, which happens to be the home of our favorite little amorphous blob of pink whatever, Kirby. And thus the game begins. The entirety of the main gameplay consists of going from planet to planet and defeating whatever enemies you may come in contact with. However, it should be noted that the player can only play on 6 of the stars unless they decide to collect all 72 of the Crystal Shards, and that will allow them to get the true ending on a planet called the Dark Star. Each of the 7 planets in the game will have its own little subsection of levels that you have to complete and defeat a boss at the end of before you can finally move to the next planet. As with almost every other game that's in the franchise, the core mechanic is centered around the idea of sucking up enemies and turning them into your own personal power-ups. But with that said, the thing that makes Kirby 64 unique compared to the rest is that you can take another power-up and combine it to make a new one. As a child growing up, this was one of the big selling points for the game for me. The ability to make your own zany power-ups and do different things compared to a normal Kirby game, that was amazing. As much as I would love to, I don't think I'm going to talk about every single power-up, because the way that you can combine them, you can make truly interesting things. There's a table out there that you can view and look at each one. So instead, I'm just going to focus on the few that I like, and I'm going to talk about those. The first on my list of power-ups would be the double-bladed laser sword, which is made whenever you combine the boomerang with the lightning ability. You get this cool little lightsaber, and you get the blade dance with it. It's just kind of fun to use. Nothing really more special than that. The second one on my list is the animal statues power-up. It happens whenever you combine rock with the boomerang ability, and Kirby will cut out little statues that give you different abilities depending on who you cut yourself out as. Also, if you're a pretty decent fan of the series, you'll see some kind of Easter eggs where each of the figures that cut out are from previous games, like Rick, Nago, Choo Choo, and Koo. And the last one I want to talk about is honestly the most goofy and kind of niche as far as uses go, but it's the refrigerator. It is made whenever you combine ice with electricity, and Kirby turns into a refrigerator that can open the door and barf out a bunch of food that you can either use to kill enemies if you use it as a projectile, or you can heal yourself if you decide to run into it yourself. Beyond that, it's pretty much your standard Kirby game. Cute art direction, solid music, and pretty good gameplay mechanics. There's not a single point in the game where I felt I was kind of in a lull, like it got dull for me. Each of the different planets that you get to visit in the game brings its own distinct tone and style, so there's a nice amount of variety between everything, whether you're in the desert, or you're underwater, or you're surrounded by a bunch of ice. It's all unique. The side characters in this game are a nice addition, albeit ultimately pointless in their inclusion. The game sees the return of two of the most established characters in the franchise history, King Dedede and Waddle Dee. It also adds in a new character named Adelaine. Sadly, they have very little interaction compared to characters in the other games. Their whole entire purpose is basically boiled down to multiplayer and bosses. Of course, once you defeat them, they join your team and become allies, and they're also accessible, like I said, in the multiplayer section where you can play as them. But it just felt like there was a lot more that could have been done with these characters, especially on a system that incentivizes the idea of local co-op multiplayer like the Nintendo 64 did. In conclusion, I think the game holds up pretty well given its age. It brought in new ideas that established creativity in a franchise that was already packed to the brim with new and fresh ideas every time they came out with a game. The impact and legacy of Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, can be felt today. Even so, with Nintendo's newest console, the Switch, they have a game that'll be coming out for it. It's just kind of an unnamed Kirby game, but we have seen the inklings of dual combined power-ups. It's coming back. The new game also will be bringing in a 4-player co-op system that I think should have existed years back on this game, but regardless, it looks like we're finally getting that too. And without much further ado, it's time for me to give my final opinion of the game, and I give it a solid 4 out of 5. I think that anybody who has the chance to get this game at a solid price should do it. It's worth playing. There's a lot that's going for it, and it's aged pretty remarkably well. It's not quite in the tier of the 64's best remembered games like Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, Super Smash Bros., Pokemon Stadium, and so on and so forth. However, I think it definitely deserves to be up there. It's a game that serves well to both its hardcore fans and new fans alike. Casual, whatever you want, it does it. Anyway, this is GrootKit signing off. Hopefully it doesn't take me another 5 years to make a video, but I guess you'll just have to wait and see. Thanks for watching.